Hey y'all, I'm gonna shoot some video of this just in case this may be something you run into. It's something that I've definitely run into on a lot of occasions with regards to doing welding. I have to write some numbers and letters, and a lot of times when people, I tell you, in the oil and gas industry, a lot of times you'll have to weld numbers and letters on plates that might be a well marker or something to that effect. Not too long ago, we had I did a video about an issue we had where a local construction company wanted me to weld their name on some concrete floats that they had, and I went into that. They told me it was aluminum. It turned out to be magnesium. We had to fix that issue. But tell you about the situation we got going on right now and what's cracking with these letters and numbers that I'm welding right now. Now, my buddy Dalton is a precaster, and what they precast as part of his business is they precast concrete tanks, septic tanks, drop inlet boxes, things of that nature, which if you don't know anything about that, it just pretty much it means they have steel forms that they pour concrete in to cast things out of concrete. And one of the things that he needs to be able to do for one of his tanks is he needs to have the number on the concrete tank of that tank. So there's it's like an 10 or 11 digit number that has to be cast into the tank when the tank's cast. This is something to keep in mind on something that's being cast. You have to write it backwards. If you're gonna put numbers and letters on a concrete form and then have that number and letter come out correctly in the concrete that you casted, you have to write it backwards. Another occasion where I've welded something that was letters that was backwards is a buddy of mine had a car, an old Ford Classic car, that we welded his son's name on the frame because this car was actually for his son. The whole restoration project was for his son. And we welded his son's name on the frame, on the bottom of the frame of the car. And the way we welded it on there is when you take this car to a show, you would set a mirror on the ground, and somebody that walked up beside the car could look in the mirror and see the name welded on the frame. So that's another occasion where it had to be welded on there backwards. So we'll take a look at this number we're doing here backwards. One of the simple ways to do this is, like, if you write that number, the numbers and letters, on a piece of paper, and do it in a way that it's, you know, some white paper. Here I've got white paper and pencil, and I pressed pretty hard when I wrote it, and then when I turned it over, I could see enough to write it again. So this is what we need to weld on the plate that we're going to attach to the concrete form. And then when the concrete tank is cast, the number's going to come out like this. So that's what we've got going right here. And I'll tell you what I've done so far. I marked out the numbers and letters on this plate with soapstone. I don't recommend necessarily that you try to weld it with just soapstone. And there's a couple issues you might have. The soapstone can get wiped off pretty easy, which is a good reason to lay it out in soapstone in the first place. I didn't measure this out or anything other than making a line in the center and realizing that it was 11 letters, and realizing that the C was the center letter because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. That was the only layout I did. The rest of it I wrote in soapstone by hand. Anywhere that it looked bad, I just wiped it with my finger and wrote it again. And it's not perfect, but it's going to be fine. I don't think it's worth putting a whole lot more time into it than that. As long as it's very clearly legible, you know, we're going to be good. So The soapstone was good because where I goofed, I could erase it and fix it. But once the soapstone's on there, then what did I do is I took a thin cutting wheel on a grinder and I scribed it. So I wrote with the grinder and scratched into the metal what I'm going to write on here. And of course, you know, throughout it all, you want to double check, get your paper and lay it there and make sure you're good. Now, the next thing I did on this plate was I took my Ed's Red, you know, the old hot sauce around here. This, if you haven't heard me say before, I make this Ed's Red as a cleaner, lubricant, penetrating oil, blah, blah, blah around here. This is 1 part mineral spirits paint thinner, 1 part K1 kerosene, and 1 part transmission fluid. This stuff doesn't hurt anything. I've run into occasions like with some PB Blaster or something on certain plastics, it'll melt it. If you want Ed's Red that is as chemically hot as PB Blaster, you can make that too, just add 1 part acetone. So you'd be 1 part acetone, 1 part mineral spirits, 1 part kerosene, and 1 part transmission fluid. But be advised, if it's got acetone in it, it'll melt plastic, it'll mess up rubber. You don't want to use that hot stuff on everything. This Ed's Red that does not have the acetone, I use on about everything. So what I've done here was I took this plate and I sprayed it with the Ed's Red and blew it off with the air compressor. Kind of what that to some extent is going to do is it's going to be an anti-stick for my spatter. When I'm welding on this, I don't want the spatter balls to stick to this plate. And there's another thing we're going to do in order to avoid having unnecessary spatter balls sticking to the plate is I'm going to take my torch and I'm going to light up a low temperature acetylene only sooty flame, and I'm going to smoke this plate. It'll turn the whole thing just black as coal. And what I'm going to be putting on there, you know, this acetylene, what's going to be deposited onto the plate is carbon. Steel doesn't stick to carbon. Those spatter balls won't be able to stick to this plate because of that layer of carbon. So that's a really good trick. A lot of times you can use oil, and the oil here would help. Sometimes you can't oil something, and you know, you can use your acetylene, and of course in this case I can oil it and I can smoke it with carbon, so I'm doing both. So what we're going to be doing now, I'm gonna get set up with the MIG. The recommendation I would say as far as welding letters, you're going to want to go slow. Take your time. Don't get in a big hurry. You're going to want to go slow. Get an idea in your mind of the shape of the letter. Even though you got a layout, like I've got it scratched with the grinder here, there's going to be times when you're welding where you may not be able to see. So get an idea in your mind where you're going and try to use all your thoughts. You know, there's certain times, no matter how good you mark this, there's certain times where you can't see your mark, the way you're making a turn or something like that, and you're going to have to use the force, and may the force be with you as you go. So you want, like, and one of the things you can do that'll help is like look at the letter or number before you start welding, and then you know, you're following your layout. But if there's a place you can't see, you should have an idea in your mind where you need to go until you can see again. So that's a tip. And on your MIG, I would say not just that you're going to be a little bit running kind of slow, but you're also going to be running not really hot. This isn't an operation where you're going to want a lot of heat. We're trying to build up bead. So turning it up real hot and burning it down in, that's just going to warp your plate unnecessarily and give you a hard time adding weld bead. We want to add weld bead, so we don't want to run a whole lot of heat. I'm probably going to be around 19, 20 volts on this. And on the wire speed, I would say run her a little high, a little on the high side. I'm going to be on my Miller-Matic, I'm going to be at 19.9 on the voltage and 331 inches a minute on the wire. And if you stop and restart, you might not have to clip your wire off, but when you very first start, or if you stop welding for quite a while, enough that the wire at the end of your gun cools, I think you're going to want to take your pliers and clip that burnt ball off the end of the wire. It really wouldn't be a bad idea to clip it every time you stop, because you could reduce some of that startup, some of that slow start, like the zip, 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 you know, the rat-a-tat-tat-tat sometimes you get from that melted ball on the end of your wire on your restarts. So we'll smoke this thing and we'll get everything hooked up and start welding on it. And the other idea that you might want to think of when you're doing something like this, it's probably not a bad idea to use a good time to replace your welding lens. You know, that might help, that you don't have a dirty old used welding lens in your hood. I'm going to be using the Arc Captain hood that they sent me. I did a review on this. I still like the hood. It's doing really well, and they sent an extra battery and some extra lenses with it, so I've put a new lens in it that they sent. I think my promo code is still active. I'm pretty sure if you buy an Arc Captain MiG 200 welder, that like I did the review on, or this Arc Captain welding hood like I did the review on, and you want to use the promo code NBS Welding, I think I'll still get credit for that. And if you try to use that promo code and it doesn't work, leave me a comment. Let me know. And I'll get on Luke and see what's going on with it, because it's supposed to still be active, and as far as I know, it is. All right? So let's weld some letters.